everybody, and welcome to the final few sessions of the Afems conference. It has been a fantastic week of amazing panels and, beautiful artwork, powerful pieces. And so I'm incredibly excited to invite everybody to join us in this moment of poetry. We're going to be having Maleka Mulligan, Cindy Swabusugu, and Vangile Gancho, chaired by Natalia Molybatsy. We will not be having Julia the Bird as the program states. I'll hand it over now to Natalia Molybatsy.
Good afternoon, Afems people, and congratulations for a fantastic conference that you've had, sharing ideas and, just listening through, knowing that these ideas will flourish, knowing that these are spaces of knowledge creation and knowledge dissemination as well. So I am also honored and privileged to give in my 2 cents and to invite these wonderful is not the word that I'm looking for, but I will use it as a placeholder. These contributors to the poetry space have made Black feminist, womanist poets and poetry the space that it is today. So I am going to first introduce, I'm going to read some of the bio, but I won't read everything, because if I do that, then truly you're not going to hear as much poetry as we would like you to hear. Hello, Maleka. Hello, Vangi. And hello, Cindy. So I first want to congratulate you for the work that you do and to acknowledge that this is not easy work, but I want to thank you for championing all of us. So let me start with Maleka. Maleka Ndlovu's words and productions have appeared on pages and stages across the world. A poet, playwright, performer, and arts manager whose contribution to South African arts and culture via writing groups, numerous workshops, festivals, and mentorship span over 25 years. I'm going to leave it there and implore you to go into the program and read more of Maleka's bio. Let me brag a little bit. I was fortunate to curate a book in 2008, and it's called We Are, a poetry anthology, which centers the work of Black women such as Maleka. And Maleka contributed beautiful poems that, if time allows us, I'm going to read one or so of them. And I'm alluding to this because Maleka has always been about movement building, about creation of spaces, talking from Weave right through to the work that Maleka has done all over South Africa within academic spaces. And then let me introduce you to Cindy Swabusugu, an award-winning poet from Durban. She's a lecturer in the Department of English Literary Studies at the University of Cape Town. She has published various poems in local and international poetry journals. In 2016, she published her debut collection of poems titled Loud and Yellow Laughter through Botsotso publishers, a cross-genre assemblage of photographs, prose, and poetry experimenting with memory and documentation. She was awarded second place for the 2015 Sol Blackie European Union Poetry Award and was shortlisted for the 2016 Gerald Clark Award for African Writers and Artists. Loud and Yellow Laughter is the winner of the 2018 Ingrid Jonker Prize for Poetry. And just going back to Sindiswa and the importance of our work or our people, Sindiswa, I'm going to call you our people, the contribution that you're making in academic spaces and the theorization through poetry is the kind of thing that continues to carry poetry as knowledge production, poetry as academic work. So I congratulate you on that. And then Vangile Gansho, part water, part dream, part impepo. Vangile Gansho is a healer, poet, publisher, and unwavering advocate for the revival of the Black feminine. As a teaching artist, she has traveled the continent and abroad for literary events, festivals, and residencies. Gansho is the author of 2 poetry collections, Undressing in Front of the Window and Red Cotton, and holds an MA from the university currently known as Rhodes, where she's also a part-time lecturer. She was named one of Mail and Guardian's top young 200 South Africans of 2018, and her work has been published in various literary collections. And please remember that Vangile is a publisher. Impepo Press is Vangile's publishing house that she's co-founded and co-manages. And that is also another important element of this life that we create, creating institutions of poetry and keeping the archive. I just want to go back to part water, part dream, part impepo. When your bio is a poem, please help me welcome Maleka Ndlovu, Vangile Gansho, and Sindiswa Busuku. Welcome, poets. And let me brag again. Here's a new book, Wild Imperfections, the anthology of womanist poems that I am honored to have Vangile featured in. So I'm kind of covered in this way because Maleka held the fort in 2008, and then here's Vangile holding the fort in 2021. Please buy these books, if I may have a public service announcement. I just want to start there and speak about, before you do your own collections, you know, Red Cotton, you know, the kind of work that you do as individuals, you start with collectives, you know, publishing in anthologies that center our lives as a collective. I want to pose this question to Maleka and Vangile. Sindiswa, hang in there. I'm coming to you. I got questions for you, but this one specifically, I want to start with a question. Have collectives started to fade? Collectives such as Weave that we knew over 10 years, and collectives like Fila Sister, for example, have they faded? Are they still significant for the young people today? But yeah, this is a long question, you know, started wherever you want to start.
Greetings, everyone, and thank you, beautiful sis Natalia. It's so good to see faces here, even if it's in these little frames. I'll take it. My heart is taking it. I feel, yes, like a go-go, trying to go back in terms of just thinking about those beginnings, and something I'm really excited about, which is a gift in disguise when you think about pandemic times on the globe. And why I mention this is because this experience of the last 2 years or more has begun to collapse our perceptions of what the frames for everything and anything, including ourselves, has been. And what I mean by that is that not only has this need to have blended or sometimes exclusively online partnerships, collaborations, networking, project production, it has forced us into that form of communication and retaining connections, but it's also isolated us in a way where we've had to ask ourselves, what is the shape of things now? It's created a reflection space. I think for myself, I've had to slow down enough to say, no, I can't continue in the momentum of building circles and women writers groups or just, circles of women in any form of activism in the ways that I have historically. Partly because my own well needs to be, I need to sit with it a little bit and understand what my capacity is to operate that way now, and that I advocate not bulldozing towards a new normal when normal was never there in the first place. So I like to think of it more as this notion of spiraling time, not linear time. And that means that what I'm finding is that things that began long ago are coming into harvest now. Things that were planted during the seemingly darkest time of COVID are coming to fruition or have been rapidly accelerated because there was no other way. And the community didn't disappear. So yes, historically, and the word was woman, fila, sister, weave, we birthed things from the soil that in the forms that were required of those times. And I'm very proud and to have been part of it, and that some physical evidence remains. But what I'm really excited about is that there's this beautiful reconnection with communities of writers and women using the arts for healing, for activism, for social justice through other portals, and also expanding globally in ways that have made that circle even wider. The ripple effect of what is happening over there is felt here in a swift way, if you have access, if you have access. But I don't think anything's been lost. I think there's something that's been composting. And I like this in-between space because the old and the new, the rebirthing is coexisting.
Yeah. Well, thank you for that, Vangi, and also, yeah. Okay, go ahead. I'm gonna keep quiet. Let me shut up.
No, I mean, I completely agree with Sis Maleka. I think that there are beautiful things that are happening. I agree about the time being spiral, the idea of time as a spiral rather than a linear experience. And I do think that we're seeing collectives of women in different ways, in that more women are reading each other's work out loud, are bringing each other's work into academic spaces, are powerfully asserting the presence of women's voices as a legitimate contribution to poetry outside the old white man narrative. And also studying Black women's literature in a voice that treats Black women's literature as something that has existed and that is not to be looked at in the same framework necessarily as so basically, if you're going to look at apples and oranges, to treat apples like apples and not look at them as if they're oranges. And so I really do appreciate what Black women are doing for making visible Black women in poetry, which is also some of the work that, so some of the work that Usindi does, where she writes about poetry and she makes powerful academic contributions to the intellectual like exploration of poetry through a feminine lens. And I think, yeah, I just think that we're doing, I think we're all right. I think we're all right. We're doing great.
Yeah, I like how you ended that, because it leads me into Cindy Swa's work. You are holding the fort in these hard to get into spaces, especially if you're bringing us. Everybody else has not really access, but if you're a Black woman, access becomes a foreign word, a foreign language that you always have to push and push and push and push. How is it that, how are you finding it? How are you doing it? Poetry as a literary form. How is this journey for you in the academy? Unmute yourself, Cindy.
Thank you. My apologies. Sure. I joined the academy really young in 2019, and I think I just turned 30. But I mean, the space that I entered into is such an incredibly rich and fertile space, because there are, I think, in the history of the English department, more Black women in that department than ever before in history. And the Black women, and I mean that within the Baconian sense of Blackness, women of color, those women my colleagues are women who are already working in those fields. We've got Barbara Boswell, we've got Mandisa, we've got Polo, we've got Nadia Sanger, we've got an incredible group of Black women who are doing creative work, who straddle the line between the critical and the creative imagination, and not even straddle, it's not a line, who understand the continuum, who understand how these two things are interlinked and woven into each other. And so, I mean, entering that space was really enriching for me. It didn't feel like I was trying to break new ground. There are women in my department who came before me who've been tilling the hard soil, so to speak. And but the work that I'm interested in doing, I mean, there is I suppose one of the things that I was called to do in that department is to work in the field of poetry in particular. That's where I'm at home, and that's where I want to be. And so the sort of students that I have been teaching and the sort of material and the writers, local and international writers, women, Black women at the forefront of the academic projects and the assessments and the assignments and our reading lists. I think, those things are political acts. Like what you teach and who's on your reading list in your primary, secondary, and further readings. That's there's activism that can happen there. There's a politics that drives that, and I think that there's been an incredible, I know, there's been an incredible response by students who've taken that up and who have felt an incredible sense of relief that there's the opportunity to write creatively. And I always say that if my only job at UCT is to get my students to write themselves into their own writing, academically, creatively, both blending, then I've fulfilled my calling, because that's the only thing I really want people to do, is to feel that they have the permission to write themselves into their own writing. The academy does so much to say that you must write in a third person, some sort of disembodied way of creating knowledge, of removing yourself from your own knowledge production. And so, I mean, using poetry to get people to feel more at ease and at home writing themselves into their own writing has been one of the most powerful experiences that I have on a daily basis. And none of that would be possible without the community of women that I'm sitting with in this very same room. You know, you have been teachers and you have been on my reading list, and you have unlocked so much for me and for the students that I teach.
Wow, can I say something? I am so happy to be here and to listen to you on a Friday afternoon as we wind, as these ideas that we've heard throughout the week percolate, and they, you know, with a cup of coffee. It should be a glass of wine, however, it's a Friday, but I would love to hear some poetry. You know, haven't been to a poetry session proper. You know, this COVID business has done a number on us. While you are getting those poems ready, I would like you to indulge me. I want to do two things, and that is reading a short excerpt of Maleka. I don't even know if you still remember these poems. This was like 13 years ago, maybe. So let me surprise you. I'm going to surprise you, Maleka. And let's see. Girl child, wild, virgin flower, surviving even where the soil aches for rain, will bear no grain of fruit, where innocence and youth is harvested with brutality, where she, more than her brother, suffers the scorching of a dominant sun, forcing her into the shadows, where she can be forgotten, neglected, underestimated in more ways than one buried. I'm going to leave it right there, but you get a sense. And then I am going to indulge myself to read a little bit of Vangi, who has not received her copy of Wild Imperfections up to this day. Can somebody please buy Vangile a copy of Wild Imperfections at your nearest exclusive books? Because here she is, a contributor in this collection, and guess what? She is yet to receive her book. So let me help you, Vangi. Let me help you. Just talking a little bit about this book, I want to say to you that Wild Imperfections has got some of the poets that you know and love: Diana Ferris, Nikki Giovanni, Makosa Zanakaba, Jackie Kay, Namshope, Nobisi Philip, Anna Maureen Lara, Lebogang Mashile. Habiba Badurun, Warsan Shire, Busisiwe Mahlangu. Yeah, it's Ijeoma Umebinyuo. It is a feast, an entire feast, and I'm really privileged to you know have been one to curate this space and to bring it to life together with these women. Therefore, I would like to read just a little stanza, because Vangi will take it from there. Breathing underwater. I am told my grandmother was a woman of the spirit, that the wind carried her off a cliff, flung her straight into the water, where I was born wrapped in the skin of a snake. I stayed underwater for 60 days before I met my mother in a burning hut on the mountain. She could enter only to fetch me and put me down, was allowed only to feed me, then return me to the fire. I'm told my lungs are made of water, that a snake coils around my spine, and I carry hives of bees inside my breast. Yeah, okay. Whew. All right, I'm gonna bring myself a little down for that. And I open the floor, the stage, with those words. I open the stage of poetry. Cindy, would you like to carry us into the space? So what I want to do, we've got time. What I want to do, I want to have a round, all right? We do Cindy, then we do Maleka, then we do Vangi. That's first round, J, first round. And then second round, we do Vangi, we do Cindy, then we do Maleka. How's that?
That's good.
Okay, this is yours, Cindy.
All right, am I unmuted? Let's see. Yes. All right, so I am going to read from my upcoming book called And in Those Honeyed Regions of Darkness. And I'm going to read the first offering. My mother was of the birds. I wait for her here, in the middle of the 8th month, in a dark corner of the room, beneath an old broken down clock with no hands, upstairs, in the screaming room, behind a locked door, on the right side of her autumn bed, 4 red bricks beneath 4 wooden legs, dressed in my father's only funeral suit, barefoot, with trousers rolled to the knees, feet white from hunger, in wet-nosed hour, listening for her. I thought I heard someone singing in the room of the one who conceived me. Behind me, the phone is ringing. I wait for her here, wiggling my toes. I slid the chair across the floor and wedged it under the door, and held inside the little pouch, hidden within the hollow book, tucked beneath the big embroidered pillow, I found the white stones she left for me. I held the book a while, took a deep breath, closed my eyes, and swallowed all 3. Soon my teeth begin to chatter, and water runs through me, flows through the corridor. I leaned back and fell overboard, and the bed swallowed me whole. I wait a long time below the ripples of a black mirror, among a fever of stingrays mottled in electric blue, all shiny as silver spoons. Some surged against the cuffs of my trousers, some sailed soft fins along the seafloor, others tried to burrow themselves beneath my anchors. My slightest movement caused the fever to quiver their bright wings, causing the water to heat up and boil. I tried pushing up through the water for a breath of air, and high above, overhead, I thought I heard a knock at the door. I crawled out of bed, stood upright on the polished hardwood floors, smoothed water out of my coat sleeves and straightened out my tie. On an armchair beside my bed sits a stiff-collared widower, a man dressed in grey tweed, turning the wedding ring on his finger, feet muddied from rain. He pauses and looks me in the face, the brown of his face stained mauve by the birthmark that spilled out from his temple. We don't talk much, but he says to me, "The motherless are here." Then carefully, very carefully, he begins emptying sand out of his pockets. That's that for me.
Ash. Fire words hiss and spit from my mother's mouth, emitting her wrath, singeing my heart skin. In seconds, I am a quivering girl, voice run dry in the face of her fuming. My water tongue fails to dilute her venom or wash away her certainty of a history of offenses. I swallow my opinions, switch to mute, amplify my listening, suppress the tide rising in me, ease the swell with deepening breath. Each story, she is sure, should have turned out differently. If she hadn't been denied, if she hadn't been denied the victory of the last word, felt she was heard. Assuming her battle stance, her body hardens with each smoldering word. She recalls the detailed lines of assault, blaming everyone but herself. I am her daughter. I am her daughter still singing water songs while she continues flaming, turning my imagined bridges mid-sentence to a silent rain of ash.
Utywala smells of milk. Ngemini yokutshisa amathambo ekuseni ngexesha lebhekile, umakazi passed away. Her sister watched her breath leave her body. Mna bendisemva komkhusane. Uthi omnye umakazi ibingathi kuqhushalaza indoda endala. She asked me about the wind, if I had heard the dogs howling outside the door. Abantu abadala bazova ngawe avukile. It's time. I'm tired. Every morning I wake up carrying a baby. She is always crying. Her eyes glaze past me. She can see I'm not a mother. She can see the knot in my back is not uncoiled. I am not well. I am not ready to be a mother. She tries to suckle my breast. The milk is slow. She will not wait for me to get well. She will not wait for me to grow into her mother. Athi amagqirha amakhulu azocela umntana. Umakazi uhambe ngekayiwisa ibhokhwe. Oko wayesebenzisa amayeza ngetyala. How do I wash a stain that is not on a cloth? Ndifuna ukumsebenzisa amayeza wakhe. Umama says abantu must pass their hand under their armpit and give it to the baby when they approach. She says this will allow the baby to see the person for who they really are. I cannot go to amagqirha. I'm not scared. I am tired. I will not be well until I go. I cannot convince my child to love me when I am unwell. I have not had a drink since I knew she began growing inside me. The smell of vodka will not leave my milk. I will never be sober enough to mother her. I brew utywala when she is 3 months old. She may leave the house now. I will slaughter a goat for her before her 3rd birthday. Her father's mother has been visiting her since before she was born. She cannot meet her because her son is running away from the ocean. I worry about this child, born of 2 unwell people. I worry that uzakuthwala amatyala ethu. I want to drink. I'm embarrassed by my breath. Umama says I should learn to pray. A mother must know how to pray for her children. Umakazi akekho.
And these poems are prayers for all of us. So I said to the poets on this panel, I said, let's have 2 rounds and etc. etc. So they decide to read 1 poem each. Yeah, Aishem. I mean, I'm like, it's a poetry session. You know, you guys are so modest. Have you not seen those poets who go on and on and on? I'm like, okay, fine. Yeah, maybe I should have said three rounds. We still have time. Mandisa, please help us with questions and comments that our people, our interlocutors. This is a call and response type of thing, as you take off your shoes and you let your hair down. How don't make these people here feel like they are the only people on here talking at you. Let's have an engagement. You will not have a poetry session like this in these times, you know, where we let you say stuff. Okay, so okay.
We have Nonde Mpuma.
Help me, Mandisa, not wearing my glasses. Hi everyone. Okay, no, please help me.
Yeah, no, okay. Nonde Mpuma says, oh my gosh, Frankie, that poem sounds like a continuation of a poem from Red Cotton that I can't put my finger on. And Bulo is inviting us actually, and that might be a powerful way for each person, as they want to share, to turn their camera on and give voice to their comment. So maybe just in the next 2 minutes, Natalia, and then we come back to the poets.
Oh, absolutely. This is wonderful. At least I don't
quick
have
2-minute round.
Okay, let's go. Let's go, people.
Okay.
Just switch on your camera and do your thing. You have to say something to these poets, or else I'll feel offended.
From Cindy to Sis Maleka to Vangi, I'm just like, oh my God, it's too early in the morning. Oh, so much power, and like literally, like, yeah. So yeah, Bong.
I'm gonna read something that Dina has just put in the group on the thread. And she says, I love the motherhood thread that seemed to run through all the poems. I'd love to hear from all these poets why motherhood resonates. Because, and it's interesting because after this whole week and having people reflect so deeply and along different lines and ways of thinking about themselves and how they inhabit their bodies, their lives, their being. But mother, grandmother, I'm going to mispronounce it. Uhuru said it was the matriarch.
The matriarch, yeah.
The matriarch, right? It was the very first presentation. I mean, on Monday, she talked about the matriarch. And it feels to me that the matriarch has kept coming back throughout this week. So it would be, yeah, I'd love to hear what the poets have to say about the matriarch. My bad pronunciation. Can I keep my camera on me? I know how it feels like to look at a screen and just text and you can't see faces.
Do you mind if I just dive in?
Please dive in.
I love that beautiful mergence of the matriarch and the archive, because in many ways, even what I was saying earlier about the spiral, a sense that there's, even beyond the body, transgenerational presence that I think the more that personally I speak for myself, the more that I progress along this physical journey of aging, the more that I recognize how much motherhood has shaped my identity, but also a dynamic in my life, my ways of moving in the world. I am the mother of 4 sons, 2 grandsons, and a daughter in spirit. And it feels like this is a harvest time as they cross their various thresholds of 31, 20, and 19, 18 into, 17 into 18, that I am, without effort, there is a visceral graduation. I like the way that that possibly echoes with the idea of liberation as well, because motherhood is such an intensive piece of work on this planet, let alone the effort or the work of raising Black men in a context that we live in. And when I think about the word mother, I don't only think of it in this biological sense. I'm just starting with what I know. My mother's presence is in my story because I was in her womb while she was grieving the death of her mother. And she became the mother at 16 to all her siblings. So her mothering is a very embodied cellular transfer in terms of how we relate to grief, to resilience, to defying what mother should mean, dealing with the gravity of it, but also the sense of accomplishment when you're fairly young to have done this big work that often gets invisibilized. Therefore, you speak it, you name it, you write about it. You resonate and honor those who did this work to get you where you are. So I think that word mother is so huge. And the last thing I want to say about it is besides this cellular archive that I feel I've inherited and speak from without even thinking to name it mother, is the play with this word mother and other, because dealing with the masculine has also been inherently part of that process. The M separated from other is a dynamic that I have to engage with all the time by virtue of how I got these babies to be here. I had some help, but also how I help them understand the ways in which we are othered in the world, my sons, I mean, and grandsons. So there's a lot in that simple. How it came to be in this poetry, I think today is just what it is.
Oh, wow.
I have a comment from Habiba Badurun, and that will be followed by Moeketsi, and then maybe after that we can get back into the reading.
Hi, Guru, Habiba, we see
Hello,
you.
beloved.
We see...
Hello, incredible poets. I know you celebrate with me the publication of Kosi Klaba's book, Our Words, Our Worlds, which speaks about the almost miracle that Black women's poetry wrought in South Africa over more than 2 decades. And you are all part of that revolution. And I wondered if you could speak about this amazing and rare thing, which is to bring out a book of poems and to send that out into the world, what it means, and also what it means for you as publishers and teachers who bring writing into the world. It feels to me that that is so important, in addition to the work that we do ourselves for ourselves and in the interior as well as in our collectives. But there are these things in the world now, these books that can last for centuries. And I wonder if you could speak about that, please. And thank you again for everything that you have done for us. Thank you.
Hey, Vangi.
Marco. So firstly, there's in your introduction in Our Words, Our Worlds, Habiba, you asked this really important question of why poetry, and how poetry then becomes this vessel for Black women to, I mean, what does, you asked, what does poetry do? And you and I've meditated a lot on that question, and how you talk about how poetry through the mouths of Black women has the power to articulate without re-traumatizing, to bring language to something without re-traumatizing. And I think there's been, when people have been quiet for so long, and not quiet because they're quiet, just unheard for so long. And we live in this beautiful opportunity to bring voice into things, to put a microphone in front of women. It becomes a gift. I feel really incredibly honored to be able to do the work we do through Impepo Press. And it's something that we take very seriously, and we may not move at as fast a pace as other publishing houses, but I'm very excited about the projects that we're doing. And particularly, I mean, can I gush about The Frightened by Letoguhle Msimang, which is coming out soon, which is an incredible complex piece of literature. It's a novella, and just the existence of these complex women who are not heroes, who are not villains, who are just women with complicated lives and complicated decisions, and who are the people we are. We're not going to get it right all the time, and we don't have to. We just have to keep breathing and keep breathing honestly. And so if we can archive that, it's a beautiful gift to be able to be a part of that process, truly.
Thank you so much. But Sindiswa, please add to that delicious answer.
I mean, sure, keep breathing and breathing honestly. Such a beautiful truth. And so to think about the work that I do as a teacher and what it means to have a collection of poetry out in the world, everybody says, poetry doesn't sell, and, we all know all of the disparaging information we get regarding publishing poetry, but that's not true, because, when I was writing my debut, I was reading Khabib Badr and I was devouring that work, and I was reading Nkosazana Xaba, and I was following Maleka Mulligan, and I had the privilege of coming up side by side with Vangile. We were doing work at the same time and similar age, and so there was already such an incredible community. There's Tony Stewart. I mean, it goes on and on and on, right? But this idea that poetry doesn't go anywhere is something that I thought, I suppose maybe if you compare it to the world of novels, fine, whatever, but there's always an incredible turnout. People gravitate to poetry. People flock to sit and be in communion with poets and with poetry, and there's something very powerful about a poetry session like this, or other poetry sessions that I've been to. There's something about the vulnerability that takes place there, and so it was daunting for me to get my debut out there, but I think I trusted that what I did in that collection was the work that I needed to do, and hopefully it helped other people think about their own lives, and hopefully they could step into it, and people did. But I think that there is a growing, that poetry continues to grow. It is not dead, and it is not a dead end. And it's because of the Vangis and the Impepo Press and the work that Maleka's been doing that it continues to, and the collections that we see growing. But it's always been really important for me to not be discouraged by that, and to not allow anybody else to hear those stories about poetry as a dead end. You'd be better off doing novels or whatever. That's not true. The turnout for today is evidence of that. The questions and the vulnerability in this moment, all of us here together, it says something about the power of poetry. And so, yeah, I think poetry does something different. And the question that Khabiba raises, that Bangile touched on, is something that I think is a question that we continue to ask ourselves every time we approach the page. And there's no one fixed answer, but yeah, it's a daunting space. Publishing poetry is daunting, but it must be done by those who feel called to do it.
Yeah. And I don't want us to leave. I see time is running out. Why is time like this though? So I want us to please go back to the poems. I apologize for comments and questions that we don't touch on. May we be healed and heard, and the answers be questioned through the poems. How were we doing that second round again?
Me and then Maleka at the end, I think.
Okay, let's go.
Okay. Missing. Malume was alone when he passed, in a hospital less than 5 kilometers from our house. His wife didn't say he had been admitted. Mama found out through a dream. Umalumekazi hadn't spoken to us since the incident with the catering money for Omalume's funeral. She sent a message to my younger cousin to tell the family that their oldest son had passed. Mama called the hospital to confirm, followed him to the mortuary, hoped to see his face. According to COVID regulations, Umama is extended family. Only his wife and children may view the body. When he first disappeared, he was missing for over 2 decades, came back with half a leg and a new family. His wife and her daughters kept him to themselves. He kept to his new family. I met his daughter once, I think, when we were preparing for Malume's funeral. Mama was 15 when he went missing. The police raided their home and Utamkulu hid in between the mattresses. Umakulu was sick. Malume followed Utamkulu to the mines and ended up in Lusaka. Mama learned how to hold her breath and raise a family. She is 60 now. He is a year older. There are no police, no raids, no body, no hope. He is gone and there is no body. A cold message with an online address, a box without a white sheet, without a candle. Omakulu Ezlalini huddled in front of their granddaughter's phone, listening to people describe their eldest son in English.
Portrait of a mother and indiscretion. My mother smells of indiscretion. In fact, she smells of strange things. Not camphor or zambak, not of anything familiar. My mother walks slowly, crossing the bedroom in high-heeled shoes. In my gray window, I see the sky. In the sky, the moon is round. She hides her smile behind the curtain lace and whispers, "My child sees everything." I'm waiting for her to hang her winter coat. I'm eager to glimpse her body. Buttons fall away. She's kneeling at my bedside upright, her hand on mine. It's raining. She is lipsticked and caressing my face. The moon is dead. Her hands don't feel the same anymore. The stars have gone out. I turn and bite her sad hand. She flies backwards. I am loud in yellow laughter. I whisper back, "My mother wears a disguise for my eyes only." My mother is an old woman. She is no longer young. Yet I smell her indiscretion. I have smelt it on her for days. She has been laughing and smiling without restraint.
While the poet was mourning, her children sprouted, extended their wings to new degrees. She thought she was paying close attention, as the loving mother she had always been. But even they could not ignore the smoldering, the smoke, as her swollen heart bled, started to shed. Her supposedly private tears, her quiet rage and fears formed neat piles of damp tissue and ash wherever she sat or lay, her eyes revealing her true state even when her poems did not say. While the poet was mourning, the days and seasons followed their routine with mild adjustments, the gravity of her being slowed down enough to notice the changes in the vast landscape outside her brick box. Alongside the seemingly endless waves of disabling sorrow, she worked and washed and cooked and spoke and walked and read and drove, comforted by the ordinary, exhausted by the paperwork of severance, the naming and retelling of how the mutual wound had turned to war, the search for new shelter, packing as much of the past out of sight. While the poet was mourning, her scalp sprouted a sparkling silver gray thread, here and there from her sleep-deprived, overloaded head. Telltale shadows spread, began making themselves at home. It didn't seem to matter whether she'd slept or how many days had passed since the puffy eye bags had left. Her eyesight began to deteriorate in almost undetectable ways. A subtle and strange blurring of letters, of edges, of shrinking digits that she dismissed or successfully ignored for a few years. While the poet was mourning, her teeth chipped and her bones began sending out little arthritic alarms. But she had taken to minimizing her smoking and increasing her walking. She turned up the music in the kitchen or in the headset at her desk. She dressed slightly more daringly, coached herself into feeling sexy, felt the adrenaline of her teen self as her overt flirting brought sudden, satisfying yet dubious rewards. Still, these daredevil woman games felt like reclamation, her way of coming to terms with how violently her compass had turned. While the poet was mourning, her father at a distance grew 7 years older, her mother in another city progressively ill, yet forever the warrior. Her eldest came home for 2 years abroad, his hormonal teen siblings now both in high school, budding muscles and beards. She moved 3 times in 3 years, traveled twice to America, once to India, and then she felt the sinking sand of debt the extreme vulnerability of no income. She took whatever jobs came her way, told herself she had much to learn, that where she had gradually found herself post-40 was not where she would stay. While the poet was mourning, she heard the usual horrors on the news, witnessed the collapse of political powers, navigated the death of icons, the murder of yet another family member, danced and howled in sisterhood, tight-roped into single parenthood, gradually returned to patchworking her losses into story, poetry, song, built up her self-help, self-care regimen, paid a therapist to help her along, did her ocean rituals, journaling, filing as each email as if essential documentation, vital evidence of how much she'd been giving, how much she had given, the many ways she tried and died, called on spirit, her ancestors, with each spiral at the brink of each rebirth. While the poet was mourning, she had been so busy treading water, being defiantly optimistic, staying afloat, that the idea of falling in love with someone else, someone new, seemed unlikely, if not remote. It was not on her agenda, a definite distraction from her plans. The last thing, she'd grown attached to her aloneness, her illusion of authority over life's changes, her weathered architecture, knowing full well how little control she had over either. So when the gifts began arriving at their destined time, she overanalyzed, resisted, rationalized, argued repetitively at length as to why opening her heart was simply unwise. While the poet was mourning, ...
And such is the nature of poetry. We wait for more. Wow, thank you so much for sharing yourselves, for sharing your truths, and for delving us deeper into this ocean of poems. I know we're out of time, but please indulge me, Bagiti. There are two poets who are published in Wild Imperfections. Kaloku, Wild Imperfections is a new baby, guys. You know how we flaunt a new baby. So I'm going to read a little bit from their poems before we close. One of them is none other than Habiba Badurun. And I'm going to say, autobiography of a reader. To read the adventure stories, to read myself from the outside into the inside, to read the song of Roland, to read the crowd silent, tricked through which Roland passed, silent and dead, to read of Moors and blackamoors, the Saracen, the Mohammedan, the Muslim, the mishappen names of the enemy that are me. There's more. However, you shall get that from wildimperfections.com and from Exclusive Books if you are in South Africa. And just know that these women, these people have given this work as a labor of love, and the proceeds from their royalties will go into a charity that will be announced. I'm going to read from a snippet from none other than Tiffany Willoughby Harrard, an excerpt from Poem for LB. We walk together, not alone. We walk together when we know we are being mishandled by fools. We walk together when we are fighting at the ramparts. We walk together when a proverb catches our tongue at exactly the right moment. We walk together when we are giving away our best stuff to people who are not worthy and are certainly not on our level. We walk together when our children are excellent and when they are not. We walk together when we have money, have no money, and are facing the wolves. We walk together. I mean, who would not want to get this book with its beautiful cover with all these people in it? And in addition, may I implore you to buy Black women's work. Cite these women, share their voices. When you know of them, share them with your friends, colleagues, and relatives. Circulate these works so that we can read and reach one another. This is a building of a movement that will definitely outlive us. These poems will live when our flesh is no more. I thank you, Vangile Gansho, for healing us, for being so generous with your spirit, and for seeing into and through time. Maleka Mulligan for being the big sister of poems, entering spaces and opening the doors so that all of us can enter. Cindy Swa, thank you so much for sharing yourself and for following when the likes of Barbara Boswell opened the door. They say leading is the job that is hard, but following is also a hard job, because when you follow, you become the leader. You become the brave and the first, so that our children can find these fruits that you so eloquently bear. Oh, Bagiti, the people who have joined us here to listen to these women's words, to listen to their sharing, may I thank you. May I thank you for all the words and the work that you've shared throughout this week. May we all survive. May we all reach one another. Thank you so much. My name is Natalia Molybatsy, and I am so honored and privileged beyond these words for facilitating this session that was not only poetry reading, but that spoke about the process of writing, the process of mothering, the process of being. Thank you so much, and enjoy the rest of your day. Ha!
Thank you all very much. There are comments in the chat, so please read through those and engage with folks, as you will.